Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Stephen Out. We are back with another Batman 66 episode review. And in today's series installment, we'll be reviewing the episode The Minstrel Shakedown. The first and sadly the last time we will be introduced to the Minstrel. This will be his first two-parter. Without our wait, let's get into the plot. We begin our episode with at the Gotham City Stock Exchange, which is under some kind of attack. As it turns out, someone's been meddling with the stock market, and as a result, prices are way off from what it actually cost. This eventually causes panic amongst the stockholders. And we then cut to Commissioner Gordon in his office, just as he turns on the news to, of course, hear about the calamities. The news broadcast is being hijacked by this man, essentially calling himself the Minstrel, and is offering help, if you even call it, to help the problem. He offers protection to the stock exchange members to have to pay a certain sum a week, and everyone must participate or there's no deal. He's essentially blackmailing and holding the stock market for ransom in order to collect the sum. Now, I honestly want to stop here and point out that this is really interesting. You are controlling the stock market, and you're essentially threatening to blackmailing these people to pay you some in order for them to continue with their daily lives. You know, honestly, that is a brilliant stroke of genius. And this Minstrel character, okay, well, this name may sound stupid, and the costume may sound stupid. Don't be fooled. This is a very interesting villain character, and I'll get to in a minute. And just as this has all been happening, we have Stately Wayne Manor, who is also seeing this thing unfold, and Aunt Harriet already falls for him. Another thing that the Minstrel is, he's also a bit of a charmer and a little bit of a womanizer. Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson see this. They get to the bat phone and slide down the bat poles. The opening credits, and we get to Police Commissioner Gordon's office. The head of the stockbrokers essentially comes and informs Gordon about Batman about the whole thing. Someone has been meddling with essentially the stock exchange, and basically the results are coming in high and low, but not right. Also, I like how Batman immediately points out, though the Minstrel being a technological genius, despite being a musician, though to many people might seem a weird and strange combination, is actually perfect, as both music and the technology that the Minstrel uses are both transmitted by carrier waves, essentially sound waves. But not only that, Batman also points out that they'll know more about the Minstrel when they're done. So already, for the first time ever, we are introduced to a villain that has fully formed, has come out of nowhere, and not even Batman knows what to make of him. You see, look at the other villains. From the Archer, from pretty much all the villains we introduced in the first season, and Archer of this season so far, majority of these villains Batman has encountered before. With the exception of Zelda, of course, although to be fair, everyone knew she was robbing banks. Here we got a fully formed villain out of the woodwork, and already this makes it so interesting. Batman and Robin go to the stock exchange and does some investigating, and just when the Minstrel thinks that they didn't find the bug that he placed, Batman actually did, but they pretended that they didn't, thinking the place would be wired. Realizing that, the Minstrel will no doubt come back and essentially plan to break in. And honestly, he has a good plan to capture him. Essentially, hide out, and essentially, as soon as the Minstrel turns up, grabs him. And automatically, I like how when Chief or our office meant to come help, he says, "Don't worry." After all the guys we've encountered, and they name list everyone, including the Clock King, who they've yet to face in the series. So just like Catwoman, they've also name dropped a villain that they still yet to encounter, and say that this guy should be easy. Ironically, it wouldn't be. That night, whilst waiting for the Minstrel to come, they ambush a janitor who they thought was the Minstrel, but it turns out wasn't, even though she was whistling the same tune that was used on the radio show that he used to broadcast his signal and broadcast his demand. Eventually, Minstrel shows up and uses this uses this guess device to blind Batman and Robin, makes fun of him, and walks away. Already, this villain is already on point, and he's several moves ahead. This is, honestly, I gotta admit, he is probably one of the smartest villains Batman has encountered so far, and I love it. Even though Batman feels defeated, he still thinks he has another way to track the Minstrel down. As when he left one of his devices, and they plan to use that to track to his location. But the Minstrel is no dummy. If he realizes, if he knows that Batman and Robin are smart, hell, his level of technological genius is on the level of him, and I like how he admits that. And if he realizes that they weren't fooled, they're no doubt trying to find their way here. And no doubt they have to lay a trap to get rid of him permanently. And I do like how the henchmen point out how, considering the wavelength, that, has to be at a certain level. And the Minstrel says, don't worry, Batman is smart. So I already like how, even though this villain acknowledges Batman's superiority, he too feels he's a little bit superiority and a little bit cocky. Anyway, Batman and Robin, along with Alfred, who has this nice scene here, use this to essentially track the wavelength to the Minstrel's recording studio, get in the Batmobile and drive off. With a little nice scene with Alfred essentially returning the device that was sent to track the broadcasting location, and comes in just at the last minute, just as the Batmobile left. And I like how Alfred gives out that little smirk. It's nice and fun. They quickly get to the broadcasting studio and begin to climb up the wall. However, just as they climb up the wall of the studio, which essentially is an old warehouse, Batman points out this could be a trap. They immediately get in and get into a fight with the Minstrel's goons. I already like how the Minstrel already planned this, but Batman was still worrying that this could be a trap. I already like how these two are trying to pretty much outguess each other as they go on. Honestly, one of the best bits about this first part episode. And even the Minstrel does know that they are efficient fighters. And also the music here is completely different, has its own completely different theme, and I really like it, I really dig it. Did I just say that? I guess this 60s show is really rubbing off on me. Anyway, two of the top henchmen, Treble and Bass, pretty much make their escape, whilst Batman and Robin pretty much deal with the left two flunkies and make their way to chase him. However, Batman does drop some things on the floor and pretty much bolts through the door, and it turns out to be a trapdoor. Batman and Robin are then tied, literally, on a barbecue rack, kind of. And essentially, the Minstrel plans to roast them alive. And just as that's happening, he sits down, plays another string on his guitars, and that's where we end our episode. Overall, Batman and Robin here are pretty great too. Great in this episode. They're pretty much throughout this whole episode trying to pretty much outguess and outthink the Minstrel, who is several steps ahead and is a huge technological genius. Commissioner Gordon, Chief O'Hara are the usual bimbo detectives, but I do like how they do acknowledge that this guy is that this new guy comes out of the work and they have to pretty much call Batman and Robin in, but it does start to feel a bit formulaic with them constantly doing that for what they presume are major threats. Alfred and Aunt Harriet, even though I don't spend that much in this episode, the scenes that they are in with Aunt Harriet falling for the Minstrel and Alfred acknowledging the Minstrel's existence are all pretty fun. And of course, the main reason why I like this episode is the Minstrel, portrayed by veteran actor Van Jones, who of course is known for many movie roles, TV roles. The guy has, for me, a phenomenal resume, and for me, I feel that he was perfectly casted for this role. Now, on the surface, the Minstrel is a goofy character. Hell, the way he dresses, he does his sing numbers, but behind that goofy exterior, there is something really sinister and even sinister and very dark. The Minstrel, for me, is, first off, he's unique because he's a villain that's come completely, fully formed, out of the woodworks. Batman has never faced him before. And the fact, even in today's comics, it's interesting to have a villain that is really a technological genius. Technically, Riddler of more modern comics is like that. But if you think about it, can we actually have a villain that is just tech smart? Purely that, with no other gimmick. And honestly, with him being as a minstrel and doing these songs, it's just, I think, is really a persona. He's not crazy. This is just his cover to disguise his real true talents, which is being which is the use of sound waves. For me, I felt Van Jones was perfectly casted for this role, and to many he might either be considered goofy, or even to many people who watch the show, one of the worst villains. I disagree. I think he's one of the best, and I'll explain in the next episode why he never came back. The Minstrel Shakedown, I find it to be a really fantastic and honestly really good episode. For me, I felt it was perfectly well written and really introduces us in this first part a really interesting villain. And of course, we need to watch part 2 to see how his story wraps up. Also interesting, in the Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises, Bane targets the stock exchange. It's interesting to find out that decades, way before that film came out, a villain tried using that tactic pretty much during the 60s. I found it to be very interesting that they went with that. Honestly, for me, this is a really good episode, and for me, it's honestly one of my favorite episodes of the series, along with its second part. I'm kind of spoiling it for the other part for its review, but for me, I felt it's just something that needs to be acknowledged. That it was the Minstrel Shakedown. For me, a really good, solid episode. Join us next time we review the part 2, Barbecue Batman. So stick around for that. So until next time, the same Steven hour, the same Steven time, and the same Steven channel. And so long for now.